so much for coming. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Woohoo! Woohoo! It's a true pleasure to welcome you all to the 2021 Village of Glencoe Memorial Day program, presented in partnership with the Glencoe Historical Society. My name is Vanessa Zorm, and I am co-president of the Glencoe Historical Society. A year ago, we gathered virtually during the early days of the pandemic that has changed our lives in ways we will and never could have imagined. This year, we're grateful for the opportunity to once again assemble together. We are here in person, a testament to the efforts of everyone in our community to remain Glencoe strong and do whatever is necessary to get through the pandemic. The men whom we honor today exemplify a similar strength in a uniquely unselfish manner. They pledged their lives and their honor to our nation in 4 different wars and military conflicts and paid the ultimate price. We mourn their loss, but commemorate their courage and dedication and recognize once again the significance of their sacrifice. They are heroes not only to their nation as a whole, they are heroes to all of us in Glencoe, past, present, and future. I'd like to begin by introducing Reverend Adam Spencer, Rector at St. Elizabeth Episcopal Church, to present the invocation.
We gather together today to remember the sacrifice of the fallen, their heroism and dedication, and the debt owed by us to so many who have gone before us. In faraway places and here on this soil, to young and old in ages past, who gave what President Lincoln called the last full measure of devotion. Devotion to this nation, to its highest ideals, and devotion to one another as brothers in arms. May our commemoration of them today inspire us to strive to emulate their courage and their service. Let us pray. God of all times and all places, in whose hands are the living and the dead, we give you thanks for all those your servants who have laid down their lives in the service of our country. Grant to them your mercy and the light of your presence, that the good work which you have begun in them may be perfected unto eternity. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Spencer. Glencoe Police Safety Officer will now raise the flag for today's program. join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance. At this point, I would like to have all veterans in attendance please raise your hand to be acknowledged for your service. Thank you. As we assemble this year in this beautifully renovated Veterans Park, it is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Brooks, President of the Glencoe Park District Board of Commissioners.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Reverend Spencer and Public Safety. It is such an honor to be here today, standing with all of you at the new Veterans Memorial Park. This year, the Glencoe Park District Board of Commissioners made a renewed, conscious effort to take special care of the park and to renovate the memorial. Before the renovation, Veterans Memorial was inaccessible to people with mobility challenges and hidden behind landscape that obscured its significance. It was crucial to us that this space be accessible to everyone and become a more prominent and special place in our community. Now that our renovations are complete, we hope our residents will visit Veterans Memorial year-round, not just on Memorial Day, to reflect and to take a moment to honor those who sacrificed for our country. Thank you so much and enjoy the program.
Thank you, President Brooks. Please join me now in giving a warm welcome to our new village president, Howard Royne. President.
Howard, microphone. Can you hear me? Sorry. Thank you. Louder. Let me say my voice is for you.
Oh, louder.
Thank you to Lisa and the Park District for your work for our village and parks, including the lovely park we're standing in right now. What you have done is extraordinary. Thank you to the Glencoe Historical Society for its mission for our village, including this program today. In particular, thank you to Vanessa and my friend John Carruthers for your parts in today's program. On a personal note, this is not my first Memorial Day in Glencoe. My first one was in 1957. My parents brought me. It was a lovely day, cloudy, like today. I don't actually remember, but I checked on the internet. This is my first Memorial Day as village president. And as president, it's my pleasure to participate in honoring the memory of the sons of Glencoe who served and gave their lives for our country. I am grateful that no one has been added to the list for about 50 years. But time does not detract from the enormity of their sacrifice. Glencoe is a small town, but sadly the list here of the fallen heroes is not a short list. As a longtime Glencoean, I grew up with some of the families whose sons are on the list. So I'm humbled to be here today with you, honoring their service and their sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you, President Rowan. The Glencoe Historical Society is honored each year to prepare and present to the community a special remembrance of Glencoe's Gold Star soldiers. Joining me this year in the presentation is John Carruthers, an United States Army veteran and long-term member of the Glencoe Historical Board of Directors. Today is Memorial Day, a national holiday, a somber but important day in which we honor those Glencoe men who have died in the service of their country. There are 35 names here on the roll of Glencoe's honored dead. These are young men, mostly in their 20s, who went off to war because our country called upon them to take to arms to protect our rights and freedom. Memorial Day began after the Civil War, officially in 1868. Originally, it was called Decoration Day because people laid flowers and decorated graves of the dead with wreaths or flags. May 30th was chosen because it was a rare day on the calendar, a day without any anniversary of a Civil War battle. It was also a day when plants and shrubs would be flowering throughout the country. The Memorial Day tradition may have come from the South, where women often decorated graves, or it may have come from a Memorial Day held earlier in 1865, one that few remember, when freed, enslaved, and U.S. colored troops buried and decorated the graves of Union prisoners of war in Charleston, South Carolina. Regardless of its origin, Memorial Day has grown from a commemoration for those killed in the Civil War to become a date to honor all who fell in all of the America's wars. Glencoe has honored its dead in a public ceremony on Memorial Day since the end of World War I in 1919. We have mourned their loss, remembered their courage and dedication, and honored their sacrifices. Each year we remember all of these men, but also try to introduce you to the personal stories of at least a few of them. This year we honor 3 soldiers who died in action, 1 from World War I and 2 from World War II. All of these men lived in Glencoe, had family in Glencoe, went to school in Glencoe, but never returned to Glencoe. We remain forever grateful to their sacrifice. Please welcome John Carruthers.
Good morning. Marinus Christensen was an immigrant. He was born in Aarhus, Denmark. Marinus came to the United States in 1913. He found his way to Glencoe and worked as a gardener on the estate of Edward L. Glazer, who owned land at the foot of Lincoln Avenue. He had been living in Glencoe for less than 4 years when the United States entered World War I. Nevertheless, he registered for the U.S. draft on June 5th, 1917, and was called to service with the 130th Infantry in the 33rd Division of the National Army. After training at Camp Logan in Texas, his unit spent a short amount of time at Camp Upton in Brooklyn, New York, before being shipped to Europe. On May 16th, 1918, Marinus sailed for France as a wagoner in the supply company of the 130th Infantry. A wagoner is a person who wrangles or takes care of horses. Those horses were used to pull supply wagons. After arriving in Brest, France, Marinus spent more time training with his unit, specifically learning how to shoot British rifles. In August 1918, Marinus' unit was moved to the front line. Throughout much of September 1918, Marinus fought to hold the line at Bois de la Côte-Le Mans, a wooded area in the south of France. He was under heavy gas and shell fire and severe bombardment all the time. Marinus Christensen, a brave and patriotic Danish immigrant who lived and worked in our community, was killed in action in October 1918. A heated battle in which his unit endured terrestrial fire, machine gun fire, and heavy bombing from hostile planes above. He is buried at the Meuse-Argonne American Cemetery and Memorial in France. It is the largest military cemetery in Europe. Most of the many soldiers buried there, like Marinas, lost their lives in the Meuse-Argonne offensive, which took place between September and November 11th, 1918. It was America's largest military offensive and the last one of the war. More than 26,000 Americans lost their lives during that period. Marinas service is recognized and honored in 3 different countries. At his gravesite in France, at a memorial at his birthplace of Aarhus, Denmark, and the memorial plaque for World War I veterans right here in this park. Thank you.
Glencoe was fortunate in World War I, despite the fact that many of our men signed up or were drafted into service. We lost only 5. The community was not as fortunate in World War II. America entered the war following the bombing of Pearl Harbor and spent the next few years aiding our allies in Europe, particularly Britain and France, and fighting in the Pacific theater to prevent Japan from spreading colonial imperialism. One of our honored Gold Star soldiers from World War II was a pilot named Roger Barrett Brown. Roger was born in 1917, the son of Thomas W. and Etta Brown of Glencoe. In 1930, 12-year-old Roger was living with his parents and 3 older brothers at 352 Jefferson. His father was an insurance salesman and his mother ran an employment business. Roger went to Glencoe schools and graduated from New Trier in 1935. After graduation, he worked as a chauffeur in Glencoe, but when the country began to bulk up its industry to produce defense armaments, he took a job at Buick Defense Plant in Melrose Park. In 1937, he married Mabel O'Kelly. Roger enlisted in the Army in October 1942, and beginning in February 1943, he spent 7 months in the first training program for black pilots in Alabama. The Tuskegee Army men were the first African-American military pilots in the United States Armed Forces, the first African-American military pilots to deploy to a combat theater overseas, and the first to engage in combat and shoot down enemy aircraft. This was notable because at this time, the American military was radically segregated, and many black Americans were still subject to Jim Crow laws and discrimination both in the military and civilian life. The Tuskegee Army men were famous for their skills and flying prowess. As one of them remembered, the government made the standards so high, we actually became an elite group. We were unquestionably the brightest and most physically fit young blacks in the country. Promoted to second lieutenant, Roger was assigned to the 100th Fighter Squadron of the 332nd Fighter Group based out of Rentilli Airfield in the massive Foga Air Complex in South Italy. This group was the first African-American flying group. Their role was to fly escort during heavy bomber missions. Roger was commended for being the first Army Air Corps pilot to successfully crash land a P-39 at sea. In May 1944, the engine in Roger's P-39 stalled when he was about 2,000 feet above water. Despite failed efforts to restart the plane, he was successful in abandoning the sinking plane. Just a few weeks later, in June 1944, Roger was not so lucky. His plane this time, a P-47 Thunderbolt single-engine aircraft, encountered the engine trouble and crashed during a training flight. Lieutenant Brown's family was notified shortly after the crash, and he was missing in action, but did not officially learn until 3 months later in September 1944 that he had died. Lieutenant Roger Brown was buried in Italy at the Rome American Cemetery at Nettuno, Sicily. Among Americans' many Gold Star casualties, Roger too was awarded the Purple Heart.
At the same time, on the other side of the world, another Glencoe resident made the ultimate sacrifice for his country. Lieutenant Alan Whippet David is another of our Gold Star soldiers that we honor today. Alan was born in February 1924 and grew up in a house at 167 Maple Hill Road. His father was an attorney. Alan attended Central School and was confirmed at Glencoe's North Shore Congregation Israel in 1938. He attended New Trier High School, where he graduated in 1941. He was an honor student, played tennis and baseball, was in the orchestra and the junior music club. He was in the cast of the New Trier production of Pirates of Penzance and was elected treasurer of the sophomore class. Alan went from Glencoe to Harvard University, but only attended for 1 year. He enlisted in the Army in October 1942 and went through Officers Candidate School. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Field Artillery in July 1943, then worked as a training officer. In March 1945, Alan was sent to the Philippines in the Pacific Theater. He was assigned to the 503 Parachute Infantry Regiment, which had played a major role in the capture of Corregidor. When he arrived at the island of Negros, he wrote his father, "I'm all ready to go, and I won't be waiting long either. This certainly is a wonderful outfit, rated the best infantry unit in the Southwest Pacific." One of his buddies later reported that by that time, Alan had learned Japanese and was teaching it to the troops. After only 5 weeks overseas, on April 20th, 1945, Alan was leading his troops in the rain during a reconnaissance mission, where he was shot and killed. He was 21 years old. Today, Alan is memorialized at Fort McKinley in the Philippines, and in official Army records is listed as a veteran interred overseas. His service is honored at Harvard's Memorial Church, and following his death, Alan and approximately 24 others from the area were honored by North Shore Congregation Israel at a memorial service here in Glencoe. Marinus Christensen, Roger Bartlett Brown, Alan Lippert David were 3 Glencoe heroes whom we remember today. Glencoe was the home they left when they went to war, and sadly, they never returned. Today, on this 2021 Memorial Day, we remember their lives, we remember their sacrifice, and we honor their service.
Today, as we celebrate this newly renovated Veterans Park, we also remember the words of Otto Barnett at the dedication of the original park. In November of 1921, the community planted a small tree, now this large tree to my right, and placed a boulder at its base honoring. Oh. I'm like, where's the boulder? Okay. Placed a boulder at its base honoring Glencoe's fallen World War I soldiers. Barnett said, "Honor the dead by serving the living. This tree is a symbol, this boulder a pledge. As the tree reaches deep into the earth, that with each spring it shall be renewed in glory. So shall the memory of these, our dead, reach down into our hearts, that our devotion to our country and its ideals shall be kept vividly alive and effectively active. Let this boulder witness our pledge as individuals and as a community that we shall never cherish and guard that priceless heritage for which they died." John and I will now read the names of the Glencoe men who died in service of their country.
We honor the following: World War I, George Brandenburg, Leon Bullard, Marinus Christensen, Norman Hillock, Kenneth McLeish. These men died in the service of our country.
World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Basil Wilford Andrews, Frank Crane Bear, William F. Bauman, George Joseph Beinlich, Gilbert Clarence Bills. These men died in the service of our country.
Edward Joseph Broughton, Roger Bartlett Brown, Thomas P. Chavez, Alan Whippet David, Foster Myler Fargo. These men died in the service of our country.
Benjamin H. Goodman Jr., Francis Gross, Donald Frederick Hamley, Martin Charles Helke, John Powers Hicks. These men died in service of our country.
Jack Kirschbraun, Donald Kraus, Robert Bandit Long, Edward B. Lott, W. Philip McNulty II. These men died in the service of our country.
James Harrington Musson, John Pendergast, Ian Fraser Preston, Robert D. Robertson, Cliff H. Stowarts, Jr. These men died in service of our country.
Lawrence E. Tyke, Robert Varick, Lee W. Walker Jr., Jack Workman, John Jasper Yao Jr. These men died in the service of our country.
And now, join us in welcoming Glencoe Eagle Scout Alec Coleman. We'll honor our Glencoe Gold Star soldiers with the playing of taps. Thank you, Alec. As we leave here today, let us remember the words that James Garfield spoke at the Arlington National Cemetery on the first Memorial Day in May of 1868. We do not know one promise these men made, one pledge they give, one word they spoke, but we do know they summed up and perfected by one supreme act, the highest virtues of men and citizens. For love of country, they accepted death and thus resolved all doubts and made immortal their patriotism and their virtue. Glencoe would not be the same if it were not for the many men and women of this community who serve their country, with many, as we have recognized today, giving their lives to protect our freedoms. Thank you for joining us this morning, and have an amazing Memorial Day. Thank you so much.